Imagine waking up to another day where essential government services are on pause and hardworking federal employees are left wondering when their next paycheck will arrive. That's the harsh reality of the ongoing government shutdown, now stretching into its third week, and it's hitting families, military members, and everyday Americans right where it hurts. Stick around as we break down the latest developments from Washington, D.C., where both sides of the aisle are digging in deeper than ever. Live updates on the government shutdown. Senate gears up for another crucial vote. Live last updated, 11:54 a.m. by Caitlin Yilick, politics reporter. Caitlin Yilick covers politics for CBSNews.com from her base in Washington, D.C. Before joining CBS News, she gained experience at the Washington Examiner and The Hill, and she was part of the 2022 Paul Miller Washington Reporting Fellowship. Through the National Press Foundation, a program that helps journalists deepen their skills in covering national issues. Read full bio, updated on October 15, 2025, 1:26 p.m. EDT. CBS News, key highlights from day 15 of the shutdown. For those new to this, a government shutdown happens when Congress can't agree on a spending bill, forcing non-essential federal operations to halt and putting hundreds of thousands of workers on unpaid leave. It's like the government hitting the pause button on its budget, and right now, we're deep into day 15. The Senate is bracing for its 9th attempt this afternoon to pass a bill that originated in the House, one that would keep the lights on until November 21st. But with Democrats and Republicans still locked in a standoff, progress feels frustratingly out of reach. This latest bill didn't muster the 60 votes required to move forward during Tuesday's vote, a supermajority threshold in the Senate that often demands bipartisan buy-in, especially on big-ticket items like funding the entire government. Not a single additional Democrat jumped on board, underscoring just how entrenched each party is in their demands. Republicans are holding firm against Democratic pushes to extend tax credits for health insurance, which help make premiums more affordable for millions. Think of these credits as a lifeline from the Affordable Care Act that prevents skyrocketing costs. Without them, families could face premiums jumping by hundreds of dollars a month. The next vote kicks off at 2:15 p.m., but will it break the impasse? And here's where it gets controversial. Is this Republican resistance a principled stand, or just politics blocking help for everyday folks? On a brighter note for our service members, active duty military personnel are getting their paychecks today, even amid the chaos. The Trump administration cleverly redirected unused funds from research and development budgets to make it happen. A move that's like borrowing from one pocket to fill another in a pinch. However, House Speaker Mike Johnson has cautioned that this is merely a short-term patch. If the shutdown drags on, troops could miss their end-of-month pay, which would be a real gut punch for those deployed far from home or supporting families back stateside. 11:54 a.m. update. Jeffries calls out House Republicans for dodging the shutdown drama. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries didn't hold back in a fiery news conference outside the Capitol, where he rallied House Democrats to highlight their readiness to dive back into work. With Republicans seemingly scattered and avoiding Washington, Jeffries painted a picture of Democrats as the responsible adults in the room. House Democrats are showing up, ready to roll up our sleeves, he declared. We're eager and equipped to hammer out a fair, cross-party deal on spending that truly serves the needs of everyday Americans, gets the government running again, and tackles the Republican-driven healthcare mess head-on. But as Jeffries emphasized, partnership is key, and that's where things stall. The New York Democrat accused House Republicans of sparking the shutdown and then hightailing it out of town, leaving the mess for others to clean up over the past 3 weeks. He's pushing hard for Democrats' priorities, easing the burden of living costs, overhauling our fragmented healthcare setup, and rooting out corruption in the system. We need to lock in those Affordable Care Act tax credits now, shield tens of millions from brutal hikes in health premiums, ensure no American skips a doctor's visit because of cost, support our dedicated federal workforce, and wrap this all up without more excuses, Jeffries urged. No more stalling. House Republicans, it's time to return to the Capitol and get the job done. This kind of partisan finger-pointing is classic DC theater, but it raises a big question. Are Republicans really ghosting their duties? Or is this a strategic retreat to regroup? 10:39 a.m. update. Thune hints at behind-the-scenes talks, but blames Democrats' stubbornness. Senate Majority Leader John Thune shared a glimmer of hope with reporters, confirming that informal chats among senators are underway about potential ways to escape this shutdown quagmire. Yet, the South Dakota Republican quickly pivoted to criticism, saying Democrats are stubbornly committed to their positions, especially after the No Kings protests over the weekend, which he called a non-negotiable flashpoint for them. These protests, by the way, were grassroots rallies against what activists see as overreach by political elites, adding fuel to the partisan fire. Thune expressed optimism that Democrats might soften in private discussions and adopt a more practical outlook. He's also eyeing a clever procedural step, bundling several appropriations bills. Think of these as targeted funding packages for specific areas like defense into a vote on the full-year Defense Department spending bill. Set for Thursday. The aim is to gauge what's feasible for extra legislation, Thune explained. We'd assemble a bundle similar to our last floor effort, which needs unanimous consent to proceed. Once we tackle defense appropriations tomorrow, real bargaining can kick off. When pressed on whether the government stays shuttered until comprehensive funding bills pass, Thune was clear. I really hope we avoid that. He wrapped up by noting that shutdowns hurt everyone involved, from businesses to families, and ending it ASAP benefits us all. But this is the part most people miss. Could Thune's strategy force Democrats' hand, or is it just another delay tactic? 10:34 a.m. update. Johnson warns of paycheck peril for troops if shutdown persists. At his routine Capitol press briefing, House Speaker Mike Johnson turned up the heat on Democrats, warning that the prolonged funding gap could leave military members high and dry come month's end. He spotlighted the administration's quick action to pay today's salaries as a stopgap solution, pulled from other resources. Thanks to President Trump's decisive guidance, we've safeguarded our troops. Otherwise, 1.3 million active duty personnel would be staring at empty accounts today, Johnson stated. He gave a nod to the president's role in averting immediate crisis, but laid the blame squarely at Democrats' feet for blocking the House's continuing resolution, basically an emergency extension to keep things funded short-term. If Democrats keep voting to prolong the closure, as they've done repeatedly, our U.S. troops face missing a complete paycheck by October's end, he cautioned. Johnson painted vivid scenarios. Deployed soldiers separated from young families who count on that income, personnel stationed overseas, renters struggling to pay bills, or those caring for sick loved ones. This Democratic roadblock would leave them unpaid, and it ought to anger every single American who values our defenders. Bold claim, right? But does this rhetoric rally support or just deepen the divide? 10:16 a.m. update. Thune accuses Democrats of pandering to extremes amid shutdown stalemate. From the Senate floor, Majority Leader John Thune doubled down, declaring Democrats entrenched after 15 grueling days. Democrats aren't budging an inch toward resolution. He said, even the threat of military families foregoing paychecks hasn't swayed them to unlock the government. They're unmoved by vulnerable households unsure about food aid, or disaster-hit residents in flood-prone areas who can't update flood insurance or finalize home purchases during peak hurricane risks. Instead, Democrats are hunkered down, forcing ordinary Americans to wait while they appease their ultra-progressive supporters. Thune suggested the real Democratic goal is something Republicans simply won't deliver: endorsement from their left-wing base to safeguard their political futures. It's all about satisfying the far left and clinging to power, he added. Pointing dramatically at the desk-bound bill, Thune noted another vote looms later today. Just 5 more Democrats on board, and it sails through to the president for signature, reopening everything. Will this be day 15 of the Democrats' shutdown, or the turning point where we prioritize serving the public? 10:05 a.m. update. A peek at today's Senate agenda. The Senate kicked off at 10 a.m. with a session for morning business, allowing lawmakers 10-minute slots to speak on topics from policy to personal stories. Catch the live stream in the video player above if you're following along. Expect a lunch break from 12:30 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. for each party's weekly huddles, after which they'll dive into voting on that House continuing resolution. Per Majority Whip John Barrasso's team. 9:41 a.m. update. Unpacking why shutdown ending votes in the Senate keep flopping. The Senate's eighth stab at advancing a Republican-backed bill to halt the shutdown bombed on Tuesday, leaving Democrats and Republicans in a bitter deadlock. For more on the nitty-gritty, like vote tallies and key objections, check out CBS News' Torian Small's in-depth coverage, updated 8:58 a.m. Good news for military pay amid the turmoil. President Trump has ensured that military members receive their October 15 paychecks today, a welcome relief as other federal staff endure the wait. In a Truth Social post over the weekend, Mr. Trump instructed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to tap every available resource for this purpose. We've pinpointed the funds, and Secretary Hegseth will deploy them to compensate our troops. I refuse to let Democrats endanger our military or national security through this reckless shutdown, Trump asserted. Officials at the Pentagon confirmed about $8 billion from last year's budget will cover these mid-month payments. Plus, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced that Coast Guard members are also getting paid. This payday deadline was seen as a potential negotiation trigger, pressuring lawmakers to compromise and spare service members the hardship. However, it's a one-off fix. Future pays remain vulnerable, prompting some in Congress to advocate for dedicated laws guaranteeing military compensation during shutdowns, no matter what. Updated 8:58 a.m. Thune pivots to defense funding as a shutdown alternative, in a fresh tactic to restore partial operations. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is scheduling votes on standard appropriations bills. Late Tuesday, he advanced the full-year Defense Department bill, eyeing a procedural vote Thursday. This shift moves away from repeated flops on the short-term funding extender, ramping up the stakes for Democrats who favor the regular budgeting route but clash with Republicans on immediate fixes. Thune mentioned last week he's open to isolated votes on bills like defense to chip away at the broader deadlock. Updated 8:58 a.m. Ninth Senate vote looms on House funding bill. Afternoon brings the Senate's ninth go at the House-approved bill to sustain government operations, following Tuesday's eighth shortfall. GOP leaders are crossing fingers for fresh Democratic crossovers, but the measure hasn't budged since pre-shutdown support. With 53 Republican senators, the 60-vote hurdle means Democratic help is essential. So far, Pennsylvania's John Fetterman, Nevada's Catherine Cortez Masto, and Independent Angus King, who aligns with Democrats, have backed it, while Kentucky's Rand Paul voted no. As this saga unfolds, one can't help but wonder, is the Democrats' insistence on health care protections a heroic stand for vulnerable Americans, or a risky gamble that prolongs suffering for all? Republicans counter that it's ideological stubbornness at the expense of national stability. What do you think? Should compromise come first or principles? Drop your take in the comments and let's discuss how this affects you.